Getaway Day. I am Mason, he is Gautam, and we are back with episode 82. It is 82 episodes of people listening to you and me talk. Can you believe that?
That is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. So we're here today to wrap up the 2022 Major League Baseball season and postseason. Unless you've been living under a rock, you were very aware that the World Series just ended on Sunday or Saturday. See, I was living under a rock. I thought it was on Sunday. And then we started getting a whole bunch of information coming out about maybe the potential postseason. So we wanted to take a minute, step back, finish closing everything out, and we'll start clean next week with this offseason. Before we get into this episode, if you enjoy the podcast, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. On YouTube, you gotta hit that subscribe button and hit that little notification bell if you don't want to miss anything. Make sure you let us know your thoughts through the YouTube comments or leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, reaching out to us on Facebook or Twitter at Getaway Day Pod. You could stitch a TikTok and mention us at Getaway Day Pod. That would be fun. Also, I've started posting some stuff on our TikTok of me playing MLB The Show. I'm getting kind of cracked at that game. I don't know if you know that. I'm kind of like awesome.
Okay.
So
I believe you.
So I think that is all of the office work that we've got to do. So Gowie, how have you been?
I'm doing good. Baseball apparently never sleeps because we saw all the free agents file for free agency just one day after the World Series. Like, there's no cool down period or anything.
No, there is not, which is very abnormal because it always feels like nothing happens until about January 30th. But
yeah, hopefully we get a little bit more action this winter here.
But yeah, so all right. So I think what we're gonna do, we're gonna start the first bit here. We're gonna talk about the World Series because I know we did quite a few live watch parties of it. Talked a lot about it, but nothing that's recorded and written down in history. So I feel like this is our time to do it. Then I want to talk about kind of just the season as a whole, some of the big stories, and I feel like the best way to do that is just talk about the people who are nominated and finalists for the big awards. So, and then after that, we'll kind of start discussing what we're going to see from here on out. So let's start with the World Series. I was wrong with my prediction of Astros in 5. You were wrong with your prediction of Phillies in 7. However, I got the team right. So do I win? If so, what do I win? And when do I collect it?
I don't think you win anything. But the Astros did it in 6. I guess it was that like a surprise that it took them that long? Not really, but
no, I mean, winning it in 5 is kind of difficult pretty much no matter what. Like 6 games is still a 666 winning percentage, and like most teams regular season winning percentage is what, under 600. So really, if you win it in 6, that's still winning it pretty quick in my opinion. So not really a surprise, but I think what that does say is that people like myself kind of underestimated how well Philly was going to play. Like, we saw how well Philly played throughout the entire postseason. And it was just one of those situations where it just always seemed like the shoe was going to drop at some point. The defense was going to struggle. The relief staff was just going to implode. Never really happened. Like, there were individual games, bits and pieces here and there, but none of the things that you looked at and said, well, this big, ugly monster at the top of the hill is going to run down and beat me. It never happened.
Right, yeah, even into the World Series, like, they put up a fight. They were competitive in basically all the games, even the final game where they had the lead in that game too.
Yeah, I mean, Schwarber hit a leadoff home run in that game.
Yeah, not the leadoff home run, but yeah, he had the home run.
It's in the first inning, wasn't it?
I don't think so. It was later.
Oh, all right. I
But
clearly was not paying attention then.
that was a different game.
Yeah, because he did have a leadoff home run at one point in the series, right?
He did. That was the game where they hit all the home runs, right? I think.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So
Game 3.
Was it 3 or 4?
I think 3.
Okay.
It's all running.
It was the first game back in Philly.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I guess right after you say it's all running together and we can't really remember which happened where.
It'll all come back. Don't worry.
So I guess what was maybe the biggest moments of the series that you remember now? Because like there's a couple for me and some for different teams, but I kind of want to hear your like top 3 big moments that kind of explain this entire series.
Number 1 that I don't think I'll be forgetting for a while is the home run by Jordan Alvarez in the last game that went over the batter's eye. That was ridiculous. And it wasn't like it was a bad pitch. I mean, it was kind of right down the middle, but it was a 99-mile-per-hour sinker from Jose Alvarado. Like, that's not exactly an easy pitch to hit, but he just crushed it, and he knew it immediately. And he's not really like a showboaty kind of guy, but he just watched it. He knew immediately. I think everyone knew immediately.
Oh, yeah. And that was crazy because, one, it was over the batter's eye. Like, that batter's eye...
I've never seen that.
I think it only clocked in at, like, 450 feet, which I thought was weird. Like, it seemed like it should have been, like, at least 700, 800, 900 miles for the official official length.
But usually people don't hit, like, balls that far. They go to center field.
Yeah.
I feel like.
That
was what was so amazing about it.
Well, and just the height that it had to get over the batter's eye, it kind of makes sense why it landed only 450.
Yeah, I thought that was a sweet moment. The way the Astros reacted, because they knew they could kind of see like, hey, we're gonna probably win this game here now with the shutdown bullpen gonna come in. Everyone jumped out of the dugout and then was greeting him and everything. And amazing moment for him because he had struggled so much during the entire postseason, aside from the first 2 games where he had the home runs, and then really until this final game. So it was kind of like coming full circle in the postseason and putting a cap on the winning season.
Yeah. And it kind of my biggest thing about this, or that describes this World Series, was the combined no-hitter. Like, it's the second no-hitter that we've ever had in the World Series. The other one was a perfect game.
It was Don Larson's perfect game in 1956.
Yep. And so this was the first and only no-hitter since that in the World Series. A combined no-hit bid by Christian Javier, Brian Abreu,
Rafael Montero, Ryan Presley.
Yeah. And they absolutely dominated that game. Like, there was no chance in hell that Philly was winning that game the way that those guys were pitching.
Yep. And that was game 4. That was the day right after, or the game right after they completely got destroyed by the Phillies and lost 7-0. So it was like they completely just stopped the Phillies in their tracks. You can talk about momentum all you want, but like, it's as good as the next day starting pitcher. That's what they say.
Yeah.
It was definitely true in that case.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of goes to show you that, like, some of those freak injuries that happen in celebrations for previous series, how big of a difference that they can make in a series, because I would not have pegged Lance McCullers as the first guy to give up 5 home runs in a World Series start. Wasn't on my bingo card.
No,
but here we are. He did it. And then the next day, Christian Javier, who people were arguing should have probably started game 3, goes and throws 6 no-hit innings. So, what are you going to do?
That's pretty sweet. What else? Should we talk about Dusty getting his ring?
I actually have one other guy I want to talk about before we get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the one other kind of takeaway that I had from the series, like the descriptor of the series. And that is 2 words. It's actually 2 names. Jeremy Pena.
Yeah, how could we forget?
he made fantastic defensive plays. He hit a couple of really, really clutch home runs, and just absolutely dominated basically the entire postseason, but continued it into the World Series. I mean, this is the guy that was the ALCS MVP, and then he comes in, and was it game 1 of the World Series was back to back doubles.
That was game 2.
Game 2. So, but game 2 back to back doubles. So he scores Altuve there to open up that game, and then a pretty big home run into the Crawford boxes. I think. Well, I guess it wouldn't have been the Crawford boxes. I think it was in Philly.
Yeah.
In game.
No. Are you talking about that game with the back doubles?
No, he didn't have a home run that game. I'm trying to think of his home runs in the series, because he had 1 or 2. But
I think he may have had one in game 2.
So it would have been that same game. Yeah. Let me just pull up MLB's website real quick and just find out. But then just over at shortstop, he just was basically a black hole for baseball. He just ate them all up. And this is a guy that during the regular season, like before the season, you were hyping him up. I had no idea who he was. Everyone in the public eye was kind of confused and a little bit upset that the Astros never went out and replaced Correa. They just brought up this rookie that no one knew who he was. And that guy turned out to be Jeremy Pena, who started out the regular season really, really strong, kind of got hurt a bit in the middle of the season, July, August, really struggled there, and then finished with an incredibly strong, like 128 WRC plus in September or something. Like, he's not a Rookie of the Year finalist, but he probably should have been. It's just those 2 months, but like this World Series kind of shows you go look back, it's like, oh, this dude was really good in the regular season too. This is probably the guy of the future.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about how he was able to sustain such good play throughout the entire postseason. How many times does the same guy win the championships MVP and the actual World Series MVP? I feel like that rarely ever happens.
Yeah,
because you're usually not the hottest player on your team for two plus weeks straight.
Yeah, I can't really remember the last time that it happened. I do know he's by the way, the home run was in game 5.
Oh, game 5.
Yeah. He's the first rookie to ever win both. If I remember, or second. Oh shoot, now I can't remember. I'm trying to remember the post-game interview that they had with him. But yeah, it's very rare that it happens, and it's even more rare that it's a true rookie. So
he kind of really helped carry that offense, especially when Alvarez and Altuve were struggling so much. You wouldn't expect them to win the World Series if you look just singly at like Altuve and Alvarez's stats for the postseason. You'd say like, oh, they probably didn't win.
Yeah, but then you look at him, you look at Kyle Tucker, you look at some really unexpected contributions from Martin Maldonado and Chas McCormick, and it all starts to make more sense. It's just so weird to see Altuve and Alvarez's names next to those really small numbers.
Yeah.
So
and it's a really good thing the series didn't go any further, because it sounds like I think Altuve hurt his hamstring in the last game. Alex Bregman broke his finger on the slide going for that double in the last game.
Yeah. So, on the tag, the tag ripped his and then Yuli got taken off the roster for game 6 because of his knee injury from the weird base running.
Yep.
Excuse me.
So they potentially could have been down 3 of their hitting starters in game 7, but we'll never find out.
Yeah. So, all right. So now let's move on to Dusty. So I didn't like turn off my mic on you, did I?
No, you're good.
Okay, perfect. I was trying to make sure I actually changed it in Discord this time. All right, so now let's talk about Dusty. Dusty Baker was the winningest manager in history who had never won a World Series ring until Saturday. He is, I think, upwards of 2,100 career wins. He's led 5 different teams to the postseason. He's taken 3 teams to the World Series, 2 different clubs. The 2002 San Francisco Giants, the 2021, Houston Astros, and the 2022 champion Houston Astros. So, what we know what it means to Dusty. I think everyone's covered that. But just as a fan, like how does that make you feel? Because he was the Cubs manager, so you're very familiar with Dusty.
So I think it's really cool to see as a fan that's sort of followed. Well, I basically have followed Dusty's entire career. I wasn't the biggest baseball fan in 2002, but I was starting to get into baseball around 2003. Obviously, the Cubs made it deep into that postseason. Now I've heard a whole bunch of stuff about the overuse of Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor that may have led to the ends of their careers a little bit prematurely. You could blame that on Dusty. You could blame that on the era of baseball. Whatever it may be, the Dusty we see here in 2022 is an evolved Dusty. He's changed so much over the years, and he's the best version of manager that he's been, I think, at this point. He's got all the experience, he's had all the heartbreak, and he's a way better in-game decision maker than he used to be. So I think it's just cool.
I 100% agree, and I think the way to think about it that I think is the most telling in kind of how he's evolved and how his career's evolved to get him finally to a ring is you look at him and his contemporary, Tony La Russa. They both managed basically the same time frame. I think Tony started a little bit earlier, while Dusty was still...
Tony started earlier.
While Dusty was still a player. But early 2000s, they were always at each other's throats. They were both equally old school, really tough guy, really intimidating managers. You've seen all the fights during the McGuire Sosa era, just them yelling back and forth. Then you see Dusty move to the Reds later in his career after the Cubs let him go, and kind of all the fights around that. The entire club just had this air of just old school, grinded out, play by the unwritten rules team. And then kind of I would say probably when he was in Washington is kind of when he started to change a little bit. He started having to, I think Strasburg was maybe still under an innings limit a couple of times because of injuries. So he was working with that, starting to learn not to just leave guys in to just take a beating, working with a lot of these younger guys, and then finally moves over to Houston, who is a really, really big analytics team. And the fact that he was able to embrace the analytics side as well as he did at the age of 74 or 73 is really, really impressive. And so you just see him cutting down his use of the same 4 guys all the time, starting to spread the love around, except for to Will Smith. Hates that guy. But
I was going to say that it's not like the old Dusty's completely gone. He's still going to ride a Justin Verlander, for example, in that game that he blew actually in game 1. There was zero chance that Dusty was going to take him out, even though that was something that fans talked about and we even talked about. But if you really think about it, that was never going to happen, knowing the way that Dusty manages.
Well, and knowing the way that JV is too.
Yeah.
If it was Luis Garcia, he probably would have had a shorter leash, but he's enough of, he's not enough of. He's an old school manager, so old school pitchers kind of get to do what they want. You run them like an old school pitcher still. You're not trying to turn a dog into a cat. Is kind of what he's been able to learn to do, is he treats different guys on his team differently, which is what you should do instead of forcing all these young guys into old school baseball like Joe Girardi did before he got fired.
Yeah.
So,
and just one more thing about Dusty, though. The one thing that seems like it's always been the case for all the teams that he's managed. Is the players absolutely love him, no matter what he's been doing on the field, like the decisions he makes, whatever he's done. He's like the ultimate players manager.
Yeah.
That is no different with the Astros. And this is not a knock against Dusty, but like, how do you mess up the Astros? Like, they're amazing.
That's true.
Kinda
I
hard
actually
to.
was having a similar conversation to this earlier, though, because someone's like, Dusty doesn't deserve manager of the year. And it's like, okay, kind of weird take, but I mean, he was really good. But yeah, there's other managers that probably deserve that. I agree. But also, you can't tell me that a great team with a bad manager is still going to be great. Because, I mean, you saw what happened with the Phillies when Girardi left and Rob Thompson was put in.
You
Absolute
saw what the
turnaround.
White Sox did this year, right?
You saw what the White Sox did. You saw what the Blue Jays did whenever Charlie Montoyo was out. And then they brought in John Schneider, who has so far been a really good manager. So, like, good or bad managers make good teams bad. Or not bad, but underwhelming.
They can bring them down. Yeah.
They can bring them down. So it's not necessarily saying that Dusty is manager of the year, but you definitely can screw up the Astros to a point by misusing everyone. And he
didn't.
And he
definitely
limited
didn't.
his misuse.
Yeah.
So I do have one final question about Dusty,
Sure.
and then we'll move on to the next thing. Is he getting his ring size to go over the black latex gloves?
That's a great question. Do you know why he wears those gloves? I really don't.
He was
didn't
wearing
used
them.
to do that before COVID. I felt like it was a COVID thing.
It was a COVID thing, and he just never stopped.
Okay, got it. He did bring back the toothpicks because he wasn't using those in 2020.
Yes. The funny thing with the gloves, though, he actually tore one game and didn't bother to replace it. It's like that negates the glove. There's a hole in the glove. You're getting germs on your hands, dude. Oh, well.
Yeah, but and then we can also relay the information that he is going to be returning on a 1-year deal for next year. Not so sure about the GM, James Click. That's a whole different conversation, but it's very strange that he might be out of his job after winning the World Series, but Dusty's going to be back for one more at least.
Yeah. So final thoughts maybe here on the postseason as a whole. Not really so much just the World Series, but so this was the first year that we had the even more expanded playoffs, which is why Philly was in the postseason at all.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up winning a 3-game series in St. Louis for the wild card series, and then advancing all the way to the World Series here. What are your thoughts? Did you like it? Did you hate it?
I liked it. I enjoyed the wild card round. I thought it was better than the wild card game of the past decade or so. The thing that bothers me about this postseason setup is the people's reactions to these results that happen in the 3-game series, in the 5-game series, in the 7-game series, whatever it is. We see some matchups between two teams that on paper seem like they're really far apart from each other. Like, for example, the Dodgers, when they played the Padres, and then the Padres won the best of 5 series, everyone said, wow, what an upset. What's wrong with the Dodgers? They can't win in the playoffs, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But that's just the nature of the short series. And just having the extra 2 teams in the playoffs basically makes it so you'll see more of those type of matchups happening. I think it's just important for people to understand that postseason baseball is a lot different than saying who the best team is over an extended period of time. That's what the regular season's for.
Well, and that's kind of what I think it was actually on the last actual podcast that we did, is I was kind of trying to touch on that, is like the postseason now is its own thing. Like, there's a champion of the regular season, and then you basically have half the league, and you're doing almost like a Champions League sort of thing, where you can win the Premier League, but you might not win the Champions League. And it's kind of that format now. Like, if you make it in, it's an entirely different managing style that goes into managing these games, which can allow a team that maybe doesn't have the most consistently effective guys, on, or they can make a run. I mean, that's exactly what the Phillies did. Like the Phillies
Right.
over the course of the season, their bullpen was hit or miss. Like sometimes they were really good, sometimes they weren't.
And then in the postseason, they got ridiculously hot, and that
then
can propel any team basically
and then you had the
that makes
Dodgers
it. Yeah.
on the other hand, where the Dodgers were so consistent during the regular season, they won 110 games. And then they get to this and they're facing these teams who are now just like, okay, throw out the number 5 starter. Hell, throw out the number 3 starter or the number 4 starter. We'll go with 3. And they lean on those workhorses, manage to win a 5-game series. Like, it's just a different game.
Yeah.
So
you almost wonder if there was a way for baseball to sort of emphasize regular season champion, make that kind of like a big deal that people care about. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
Because we're so conditioned to care about who wins the World Series, and that's the only thing that matters for some reason.
Yeah, you almost have to get back to the point where it's like the original pennant races. Like where it was everyone was vying for the pennant because that was your ticket to the World Series.
And obviously we can never go back there, but that's
correct.
Why it was a big deal.
But you need to come up with a way to almost market the regular season champion as that. It's like a Big Ten champion versus the NCAA tournament champion. And it's also another good comp because as that got bigger, you started seeing more upsets of the teams that just squeaked in, the 15 seeds over the 2s. Now you're seeing the number 6 seed over the number 3. Mm-hmm. And 6 seed over the 1 on the other side. So like that's kind of where we're getting with it now. It's like its own NCAA tournament afterwards. So
yeah, but sounds like we're just kind of like knocking it, but I thought the postseason this year was really fun. A lot of huge moments. I felt like there were a lot of really big home runs in these games. Manny Machado had some huge home runs in that Dodgers series. The Bryce Harper home run against the Padres to give them basically the game winner of that series. That was like an epic moment. That one is going to just be playing in Philly like bars for the next 50 plus years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be in Philly what the 2020 wild card series from the weird playoffs. The Fernando Tatis home run off of Giovanni Gallegos in the bat flip that I've got the shirt that's got the bat flip on it. The flip the script one. That Bryce homer is going to be what that is over in San Diego. Like, it's just everywhere. Like, that is the most iconic bat flip that you've probably ever seen if you're in San Diego. Is the same for Philly.
Yep.
Let's see. I think let's go ahead and start transitioning here a little bit into more of the regular season. Now, before we do that, I kind of want to do a little game for you or with you. So we had people who enjoyed the when I was just sitting here with my cards that had the autographs and I was making you guess who they were. I've decided to pull out one card out of my collection of a player who played in the World Series. I will give you that. I will give you 5 questions to ask, or that you can ask to narrow down who it was. It could be any question.
Can I make guesses? Can I make guesses that, or does that count as a question?
That counts as a question.
Okay. So then I'll ask my 5 questions and then guess, basically.
Yes. So ask your 5 questions and then guess. And it can be any question. I can answer if you ask.
Is he on the Astros?
Yes.
Is he a batter?
No.
Is he a starting pitcher?
Yes.
Is he left-handed?
He wasn't last time I thought, but I always mix up hands. No, he is not left-handed.
Okay. That only ruled out Framber, so that probably wasn't the best question to ask. Did he finally win a game in the World Series?
He did.
Is his name Justin Verlander?
It is Justin Verlander. So I have broken out the 2005 Topps draft pick Justin Verlander PSA 8.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, figured.
Did you read the story about Justin Verlander after he won the first game? They like rode him around in the clubhouse in like a shopping cart and gave him a bath and like mayonnaise and stuff like they do for a pitcher that wins his first game in the big leagues.
I did not hear that. No, yeah. That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to see if Ben will share more about that because I'm sure he knows more. But
the man was so giddy after that victory. It was absolutely great.
Yeah, I mean, I was so happy to see him get that because that's something that he's been after for 16 years.
Literally his entire career. Yeah,
16 years. Like it's nuts. But all right, cool. So Justin Verlander, which brings us
there then
directly into my next segment. So the way I want to kind of talk about the regular season is I want to talk about the award nominees and kind of use that as a guide to talk about the highs of this baseball season. So we're going to start with the AL Cy Young. Our nominees for the AL Cy Young, Justin Verlander, Dylan Sheesh, and Alek Manoah. So all three guys incredibly, incredibly worthy of a Cy Young. I mean, you have Justin Verlander, who I believe his ERA was down sub 2. Yeah, 175 ERA, 6.1 F4, 175 innings after coming back from Tommy John and a second missed season from. Well, so he hurt his elbow in 2020 in his first appearance, missed the entire rest of that shortened season, and then missed all of 2021. Comes back 175 ERA and 175 innings.
Yeah.
Absolutely
not to mention
nuts.
that the guy's 39 years old.
And he's 39 years old. So
I think he's like, if you're asking who's going to win the award, it's definitely going to be Verlander, I think. But we can definitely talk about Cease and Manoah as emerging aces, young aces. They're kind of like really good. Manoah kind of came onto the scene in 2021, and he totally just like followed up his amazing rookie year with another amazing year. He's like clearly one of the best pitchers in the league at this point.
Yeah, but like when I look at this group, though, the one that kind of stands out to me, and I mean, obviously they all stand out because they were all phenomenal, but Dylan Cease specifically, because this was a White Sox team that unfortunately drastically underperformed. I do kind of suspect that it was pretty heavily the manager's fault. There was also a lot of injuries. There was a lot of guys who just weren't really clicking, but I do think the manager was part of that. But Dylan Cease, through all of that, did not miss a start, 184 innings pitched, a 2.2 ERA, struck out 30% of batters that he faced. Like, he was just downright nasty this year. And the only reason that he's probably not winning the Cy Young is because Justin Verlander just happened to be alive still. So.
Yeah, he was ridiculous. 2.20 ERA, 3.10 FIP, struck out 11 batters per 9 innings. Everyone knew that he had this potential, but he always
he's never realized
held
it
back.
Though.
Yeah, and this was the year that it all came together, and that's always cool to watch.
Yeah, because like his peripherals this year, not that much different from last year. He did throw about 20 more innings than he did in 2021. His K rate was actually lower. Walk rate about the same, but there was just something about it that he was giving up a few more home runs last year, and it took his ERA to 3.9. And then this year, with essentially the same peripherals, comes out with a 2.2. So,
yeah,
and that's just at the really surface level stats. I'm sure there's a lot more to that than what I'm going to present here today, but it's just, you could always tell that this potential was there. And now, finally, in his 4th season in the big leagues, we got to see it. So, all right. Anything else in the AL Cy Youngs, or shall we move on to the NL?
Let's go. Yeah.
All right. So the NL Cy Young, I think this one is maybe a little bit less of a open and shut case as the AL one was with Verlander, but we have Sandy Alcantara, Max Fried, and Julio Urias. All 3 very, very good candidates for this. Sandy Alcantara led the major leagues in innings pitched this year. And kind of similar to Dylan Cease, on a team that just was not good. He had a 2.28 ERA, 228 innings pitched, 2.99 FIP for almost 6 FWAR. His K rate not quite as insane as Dylan Cease at only 23%. He has a really, really high ground ball percentage. So he's really got to thank Jazz Chisholm, Miguel Rojas, and the guys behind him for keeping those balls contained. But like, Sandy was just lights out.
Yeah, he feels like a throwback guy, and what I like about him so much actually is that he's able to be so effective even with not getting the crazy amount of strikeouts like a Cease or an Ohtani or someone like that. And basically, every time he goes out there, you know he's going to go deep into the game. Like he's going like 7, 8, 9, at worst 6 innings every single time out. So that's like all you can ask for from your starting pitcher, and he keeps you in basically every single game.
Well, and the weird part to me is a guy like that on a team like the Marlins, especially the 2022 Marlins. I am always worried that that's going to end up being like a 2019, 2021, like Aaron Nola, or as like where he's really, really good for the first 6 innings. And then there was no one to turn to. So he got left in too long, and then he gets blown up in the 7th. That was never the case with Sandy. Like,
yeah, that's a good point. Like, it seems like he would able to be sustaining what he was doing within a game throughout the game and not ever fall apart.
Every 5 days.
Yeah, every 5 days. Very reliable. He's made all his starts like, well, he only made 7 starts in 2020, but basically the last 3 full seasons, he's made 32 or 33 starts in each of those seasons. So modern day workhorse. And every year he's like throwing harder and harder. His average fastball is 98 miles per hour.
Yeah. So I feel like he's got to be the leading candidate here for the Cy Young.
So.
Like, he doesn't have the lowest ERA in the National League. That actually, I believe, belongs to Julio Urias with the 216. But it's also 50 innings different. So Urias only pitched 175 innings, about a 24% walk rate. Or 24% strikeout rate. Only a 6% walk rate. Incredibly good there. And the FIP ERA difference for Urias was a lot more of a stark difference here, with basically a 1.6 point difference. So it definitely looks like he benefited a lot from this Dodgers defense. And because of that, he only amassed about 3.2 WAR. And then you got Max Fried, who is kind of right in the middle. Like, he had the highest ERA out of the bunch, but he threw 185 innings, had 5 WAR. His FIP was still under 3. Like, so this is kind of a weird one for the number 2, because it's like, you would look at the surface numbers and say Urias should probably win it. Oh, innings, Sandy, then Urias number 2. But I kind of think Urias might be 3rd here, just because it seems like he benefited a lot more from the team around him, whereas both Fried and Sandy basically kind of earned their ERA in full.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I actually agree, but can you ding Urias just because he plays for like a team that knows exactly where to position all their fielders? All their pitchers have higher FIPs and ERAs.
Yeah, that's fair. And you really can't ding him for that. But it's just one of those that kind of makes you think is like how valuable was he in and of himself?
Yeah.
So, because that's kind of what the Cy Young is for, is like, this is the guy that was worth the most as a pitcher. Well, there's an argument to be made that maybe Arias wasn't as valuable as a pitcher himself because of how good that defense was.
Mm-hmm. And it's not all defense. Like, you got to give him a lot of the credit for it. Like,
oh yeah,
he gives up. He limits the hard contact.
Yeah, and still a pretty high ground ball rate there at a 40% ground ball. Like, so yeah, he definitely keeps the ball down, keeps it in the park, and what isn't a strikeout, he's putting in the hands of his fielders, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah, I think the Cy Youngs are pretty straightforward, right? And
I think so.
Pretty telling of quite a few different types of teams. You've got Cy Young contenders on the World Series champion. You've got Cy Young contenders on some of the worst teams in the league. And then you've kind of got everywhere in between. Like, I think 4 of them made the postseason and 2 of them didn't come particularly close to the postseason. So
come on, the White Sox are kind of close. They were 500.
Kind of close, but like it was still like 6 or 7 games, wasn't it, by the end of the season?
I suppose.
Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to just sit here and shit on the White Sox, but like Cleveland kind of took it over at the end and made it not particularly close. All right, but then we're actually going to skip what's next on the rundown and go down to the rookies, because I think that tells an entirely different story, because all these pitchers that we just talked about for the Cy Young have been around 4 or 5 years. In the case of Justin Verlander, 17 years. Like, but then we get down to the rookies, and this was kind of a really interesting rookie class, in my opinion, where American League was maybe the best rookie class that we've ever seen for an individual league. National League, not so much. So I'm going to let you kind of, I want to hear how you want to approach the rookie of the year conversation here. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the rookie class being really surprising. I feel like there were more, I guess maybe I might be wrong about this, but it felt like there were more impact rookies this year than last year and maybe several other years in the past. With the leading candidates, like if we just focus on the American League, our 3 finalists we have here are Julio Rodriguez, who seems like he's going to win the award, Adley Rutschman, who probably would have been a bigger threat to win the award if it wasn't for how late he actually made his debut, and then Stephen Kwan, who was really kind of a surprise candidate. No one would have seen that really at the beginning of the year, but he ended up being like a super solid player, and he's definitely a keeper for the Guardians outfield.
Absolutely. And there's a whole bunch of guys that are not on that list too.
Right. So we talked about Jeremy Pena, who was pretty great as a rookie. And then who else am I missing? Bobby Witt, who was showing the tools that make him potentially like a top 5 player in the league down the line here.
And then you've got like 16 other Cleveland's Guardians rookies that a lot of them feel like they could be. Like, Oscar Gonzalez was pretty solid. Maybe not quite as high as these guys, but like there's a bunch of rookies there that like you got to look at and go, oh, they had a pretty good year. And in a lot of other seasons, and when we talk about the NL, you'll kind of see what I mean. A lot of other seasons, guys like an Oscar Gonzalez might actually be in this conversation. So, but yeah, like this is just an insane rookie class with J-Rod, Adley, Bobby Witt Jr., Stephen Kwan, who has no power but is on base like 400, it seems, is his OBP or something.
Great defense and everything.
Great defense.
He's a great baseball player.
I'm kind of surprised he plays left.
Like, he only plays left because you got Miles Straw in center.
What about right field?
Well, I don't know.
We don't want Josh Naylor out there anymore.
He's not out there anymore.
Good. Yeah. But then the NL Rookie of the Year race kind of seems it's not as stacked. Like you have a phenomenal top two in this NL Rookie of the Year in Spencer Strider and Michael Harris. Like it seems like anyone that the Braves brought up this year, you would think they would have been in the league as all-stars for about 5-6 years at this point. In the mustache game on Spencer Strider, that alone should win that man the Rookie of the Year. So
yeah, that was insane what the Braves did with all their prospects that they called up. Every single guy seemed to have success. In the case of Michael Harris and Spencer Strider, they were guys that they locked up long term. They had no hesitation about giving these guys massive amount of money when they could have just not done that.
Yeah, I mean, they had him for 5 more years. Why lock him up now?
Yeah, exactly. But that's how they roll. And those two players, like Michael Harris, he's got a case to be like maybe the best center fielder, like all around player in the game, other than maybe like Mike Trout. Like,
well, and if you're really looking at in the game right now today, you could almost argue that like Trout is maybe at the end of his center field career and close to his right field career. So like you could almost make the argument that he's better than Trout specifically at center field.
Right. Yeah.
But then you get to third in this NL Rookie of the Year, and that's where things start to fall apart. And Gowie actually before the episode kind of talked me into my own guy. Because I was not giving him enough credit here in Brendan Donovan, who's the other finalist. But like Brendan Donovan is definitely a step below Strider and Harris. He played 6 positions. He was a 4 WAR is what you said, right? B WAR, a 4 B WAR rookie at 6 different positions and hit incredibly well. It's just for like even me watching him every single day, you kind of forget how good he is because he's never playing in the same spot. But he became the Cardinals' leadoff guy like every day and really excelled. But then behind that, like you've got Lars Nootbaar, Jake McCarthy, Seiya Suzuki had a solid season, like kind of underrated because it was on the Cubs. Like, I don't know. It just seems like that third spot is a lot less of yes, this guy is definitely the third best rookie in the league than it is with like Kwan, for example.
Yeah.
So
I think, but those guys you just mentioned there, like Jake McCarthy, Suzuki, Nootbaar, like they all had pretty solid rookie seasons, right? That's why they're probably gonna show up down ballot on that vote. But that's what rookies used to do. Now it seems like rookies just show up and they're like superstars.
Exactly. More often and that was kind of my point. Because like even as recently as last year, look at the NL Rookie of the Year race. Like it was Dylan Carlson, Jonathan India won it, and then who was the other one?
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dylan Carlson didn't have a particularly great 2021. Like he was solid. He got third. Jonathan India did have a really good season. He deserved it for the NL guys, but he wasn't even anywhere near what Michael Harris did, and he's probably coming in second to Spencer Strider. Like, that's just kind of the rookie class that we just had. Like, I don't foresee there being a rookie class this good again for a long time. It just it feels.
I could buy that. So. Right. I think Harris might win it just because he's a position player.
Really, I see, because I feel like Strider was just.
Oh yeah, Strider was ridiculous. We haven't really talked about him, but he had 200 strikeouts in 130 innings. Like that's ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, he only started 20 games because he started or because he pitched out of the bullpen for 11 games.
Yeah.
But yeah, struck out 38% of batters. He broke John Smoltz's team record for strikeouts in a game with 16. Like. Mm-hmm. He had and then his ERA is actually inflated compared to his FIP by about a full point. Like, or a full run. Like, he was insane. Like, if he would have pitched the whole season at that level, he'd probably be in the Cy Young race. But
I bet he's going to get votes.
I bet he gets votes, but the 130 innings is probably what kept him out of the finalists.
Yep,
But
we just have hopefully a full season of Spencer Strider next year to look forward to.
yeah. All right, so the last one before we get to the obvious story of the season, we're gonna go manager of the year next. And this one, I feel like it is always a weird award because it's like
It's a very weird.
the managers don't really like they have a pretty big say on what happens in a game as far as when you're pulling guys, putting guys in, all that good stuff. But the actual on-field production isn't really them. So, like, how do you judge a manager of the year? And so we've got guys like Tito Francona in the American League, who's a finalist, who's been a finalist seemingly every year forever. You got Brandon Hyde, who took the Orioles, who were supposed to probably be the bottom of the league again, and got them almost to the postseason somehow. And then you've got Scott Service, who took a Mariners team that last year just missed the postseason. You could argue that maybe they got lucky a lot last year, winning a lot of games by one run. But this year, their run differential this year was substantial, especially compared to last year. This is a team that definitely deserved to be where they were. Took them to the postseason for the first time since 2001. That's a big deal. And Scott Service had a pretty big chokehold on how that team played each day, especially with young pitchers like Logan Gilbert, like George Kirby. So, in the way that he used his elite bullpen there. So, I'm curious what you think on that, because all three of these guys deserve it for the way that they handled their team. I mean, Tito's team was supposed to be in third or fourth according to preseason projections. They won the division.
Yeah, I think that's the key point about this award. It's usually won by the team or by the manager of the team that exceeds expectations from the beginning of the season. So the Orioles makes a lot of sense because I think everyone picked them to be last place. They didn't finish in last place. They probably won 20, 30 more games than people thought they were going to win. I'd give it to the Orioles in this case. For sure.
I definitely think Scott Service is a very close second there, because I think taking that team to the postseason for the first time in 21 years, that's a really big deal. He almost deserves that recognition just because of what that means for the city as a whole as well. I realize that's not a factor in this, but it maybe should be in some instances. And then the NL Manager of the Year, it seems like it's all the other way, where it's teams that were all expected to do really well and all did really well, where you got Dave Roberts, Buck Showalter, and Brian Snitker. All three teams made the postseason. The only difference
is with Buck Showalter, it's a little bit different because he's the new guy in the new situation, taking the Mets from a non-playoff team to a playoff team. That's the difference between him and Dave Roberts and Snitker, who already had good teams. I feel like those managers never win, even though they're continuing probably to do a good job. They're good managers and everything, but they're not going to win.
Yeah, right? Roberts did take the Dodgers to their all-time win record of 110 or 111.
I don't remember. 110, I think.
But
same thing as with Dusty. How do you mess up the Dodgers? It's even harder.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's always an interesting award to me. We'll see who ends up getting them. Which I guess I probably should have mentioned when these awards are being handed out. So the Rookie of the Year is being handed out next Monday on the 14th. The Manager of the Year on Tuesday the 15th. Cy Young on Wednesday the 16th, and then the MVP, which is, I think, what kind of tells a majority of the story of baseball this year, especially in the American League. So we'll start with the National League. But the MVP is handed out on November 17th, on Thursday. So by Thursday, we should know, I think, all of the awards, except for maybe the Platinum Glove. But yeah, so the
You're
NL
asking
MVP,
me? You're asking me, the guy that like barely cares about these awards?
Yeah, the guy that hates the awards and is just talking about it because I asked him to. Pretty
I mean, I
much.
like talking about the players.
Fair. But yeah, so in the NL MVP, you've actually got kind of similar to what you had in the National League Rookie of the Year, where you got two guys on the exact same team, in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. And then Manny Machado is the other one. And all three of these guys, I think, were 8 WAR or higher in F WAR. Does that sound right to you? I think maybe 7.9 might have been the lowest. But yeah, just absolute stellar seasons from all three of these guys. And actually, Manny Machado led the National League in WAR, or in F WAR, with 7.4. Arenado was 7.3, and Goldie was 7.1. But
yeah,
like,
this is like a real race. I feel like I don't know who's going to win, honestly. Because at the beginning of the year and through the middle of the season, it seemed like Goldschmidt was running away with this one. Then he tailed off a little bit near the end of the season.
yeah,
and Arenado and Machado continued to play well basically the entire year. So it's like they all have their own case for it.
I do think Goldie will still get it.
I think so too.
And I think the reason for that is because while he didn't get his triple crown, and in fact, I don't think he led in any of the 3 categories, because I think Pete maybe led in RBIs, Schwarber led in home runs, and then Jeff McNeil led in average.
What? Maybe I don't remember actually.
But Goldie was still like basically second or third in all of those categories. 115 RBIs, 35 home runs, a 317 average. This is the single best season of Paul Goldschmidt's career. And he's had a couple of second place MVP finishes, still had 7.1 F WAR as a first baseman who gets zero help from a defensive standpoint. And if you look at his defense, like, he is still just like a fly trap, like a over at first base. Like, Nato is the Gold Glove in the NL. You could argue that Brian Hayes probably should have won the Gold Glove, but Gold Gloves are stupid. But the 10-time Gold Glover, who also almost hit 300, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, but he was helped a lot by his defense, making all these crazy catches, all these crazy throws to first. Well, a lot of those throws probably would have been errors if it weren't for Paul Goldschmidt. And he gets no love from his defensive side as far as WAR is concerned. So you could make the argument that Goldie is definitely more deserving than Nato in this case, because the offense was so much better, and he basically kept Nato from making about 15 more errors than he should have, or than he did. So,
yeah, I suppose. And then for the case for Manny Machado is that he was like the single superstar guy that the Padres had, and he was a major reason why they were any good at all, because they had so many struggles on offense and everything. Obviously, the Cardinals had an awesome season. They had 2 MVP, top 3 finishers in their lineup every day. Machado is alone with no Tatis, and he had one of his best seasons too.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, he's basically dead even with Arenado, except for more runs scored. So, like, and even if you're looking at WRC plus, like Machado and Arenado, 152, 151, like that's equal, the stat that we sit there and say is like the best that we currently have conglomeration stat, to just look at a guy and say he's a better hitter. Goldie, on the other hand, 177. Like, that's a pretty substantial difference. And OPS plus, also an equally big difference. So, like, it does feel like this is Goldie's award still, but it's definitely not a slam dunk. It's not going to be unanimous, I can tell you that. So, but the more interesting argument more interesting discussion, in my opinion, is actually the AL, though, because we've had 2 basically historic seasons in the American League. One of them is version 2 of last year's MVP, Shohei Ohtani. Even better pitcher this year. equally good hitter. Not as many home runs, but equally good hitter. Better pitcher. Shohei Ohtani being a two-way player probably should win every MVP ever. That seem reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, this Judge season is
Well,
kind of like the biggest story of 2022, and it's a
it's kind of the
special
biggest
one.
story since 2003, 2004.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
But yeah, so you make the argument for why Judge deserves MVP here.
He faced the toughest pitching in Major League history, and he hit 62 home runs, and he basically had a offensive season that's probably like top 20 best offensive seasons of all time, somewhere in that range, maybe.
So
Um,
I'm going to read you a stat line. It is not Aaron Judge. You'll probably pick up on who it is pretty quick. 218, 323, 504 with 46 home runs.
Schwarber.
Now I'm going to read you Aaron Judge's stat line. 311, 425, 686 with 62 home runs.
Yeah, just the fact that the gap between the number one home run guy and the number two home run guys was 16 home runs, like that's absurd. We haven't seen a gap like that in a while.
But
He was just miles ahead.
But the other thing is, it wasn't just the home runs. Like his triple slash was pretty much Goldie's triple slash. And we just talked about how good Goldie was a minute ago. It's just a pure hitter. Judge was exactly that.
And
with way more power.
And let's not forget that Judge played center field pretty passively, played really good right field. He stole 16 bases this year. Like he did everything.
Yeah.
Really, really well.
This is maybe the one thing that I think can surpass a Shohei Ohtani dominating, being a top 7 hitter and pitcher in the league at the same time. This is maybe the only thing that could pass that as far as an MVP is concerned, just because of how ridiculously good of a hitter he was and how it was a historically great season from the home run standpoint, from the just missing the Triple Crown. Like, it's kind of hard to not give him the nod here.
Yeah, I think he's going to win it pretty easily, but obviously it's a really unique pair of candidates here that were in the running, and not to take anything away from Ohtani's season, right? Like the guy was ridiculous.
Well, in any other year, he would have won this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we haven't even mentioned the third finalist. Like, I don't think we've even said his name yet. Yordan Alvarez. Like, it's a really stout top 3.
Yep.
Because I think we were looking the other day. I think Yordan Alvarez is potentially on pace to be the single best full-time DH that we've ever seen. And he's starting to get more looks in left field too, which is the weird part. I was
going to say, he's not really a DH. He's a proper outfielder.
But yeah, like he even had 306, 406, 613 with 37 home runs. Like he was what you would expect Judge to have done. With 6.6 F-WAR is a primary DH with 56 games in left. So, yeah, I think this is Judge's award this year, but I do think that Ohtani in any other season probably would have repeated his MVP here. So, all right. So that is all the awards and the finalists. I think that pretty well sums up a lot of the team's regular season as well, right? Like all the big storylines of the season, except for maybe the teams that just absolutely crapped themselves. And
yeah, we didn't talk about any of the rebuilding teams. So there's just one more point about this kind of ties into the playoff format and everything, but basically there's not that many really bad teams in Major League Baseball anymore, because I think the teams are realizing now that you don't have to be the Dodgers, you don't have to be the Astros, you just have to be kind of like the Phillies and just squeak into the playoffs, and you will have a legitimate chance to advance in the postseason and make your team look good and everything.
Yeah.
There's really not that many teams that are just completely have no chance at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. But we did still have multiple 100-loss teams, and I do hope
There's
that those teams start to
truly dreadful teams like the A's and the Nationals.
and
there's always going to be a
Royals
couple
started
of
to
those
fall
teams.
off. The Pirates were still down there, like
Yeah.
I think that pretty much finishes our recap. So you want to give us just like a really brief rundown of what's to come? Because I know there's a lot of stuff that happens here in the next like 2 weeks.
Yeah, so like we mentioned up top, baseball does not sleep. Players have already filed for free agency. That was on Monday. The GM meetings are in progress right now in Las Vegas. On November 10th, the players can start actually signing those free agent contracts, and the teams have a deadline to offer qualifying offers to their free agent players. And then on November 15th, there's a deadline for 40-man rosters to be kind of set and have minor league players added who are Rule 5 draft eligible. November 18th, there's a non-tender deadline for arbitration eligible players. November 20th, the players must accept the qualifying offer. Winter meetings in early December, ending up with a Rule 5 draft on December 7th. Arbitration filing deadline on January 13th. So just all kinds of little items on the baseball calendar as we go through November and December and January.
Yeah, which feels different from years past. And we've not had a normal offseason in a very long time. I mean, we had the lockout last offseason. We had COVID the offseason before. We had just people not signing until after the season started in 2019. Like, it's been a long time since things have gone the way that they are typically scripted. So we'll see how this goes. We're going to be here to cover it. We do have some plans already for the next couple weeks because I know we're getting ready to come up here on Thanksgiving. So just a heads up, we will be doing an episode next week. And then we're going to take the week off for Thanksgiving, and then we'll be back on the 29th after that. Plans are already kind of in place for what we're going to talk about. So stay tuned for teasers on social media. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell so that you get notifications every time I post an episode. You can let us know your thoughts through the YouTube comments, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or reaching out to us on Facebook and Twitter at Getaway Date Pod. You can follow our TikTok, which I probably should post some more content because it's been a couple days, but I have been getting a lot better at posting there. So definitely follow it because it's getting fun. So I think that might be it for us tonight. So we will see you back here next week, and we will start talking about the upcoming off season. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.